I'm Mars. I am from the United States. I'm a big reader. I like to play music and meet new people and have new experiences and adventures. And this is my ghosting story. I met this girl at a coffee shop that I worked at a couple of years ago. And we started chatting while I was making her coffee. And she just seemed really funny and charming and, of course, very attractive. And we just started talking and felt like we really hit it off. And I asked her for her number, which was a little weird because I was at work. It's not as socially acceptable. But she said yes, and yeah, we started connecting and thought that it would make a lot of sense to get together and hang out and see if things could progress further from there. I think at first I was just really excited. Whenever you meet somebody new, there's always that feeling of fresh possibility. There's just, it's something new. I mean, we've all felt, you know, new affection for someone before. For her specifically, I think she was very charming and funny and very attractive. She worked out a lot, so she was quite fit and very intelligent. She was a big reader and was studying to become a doctor, actually. So I don't know what she was doing hanging out with the local coffee shop boy, but she must have liked me for some reason. I think the first thing a person would have noticed about her were definitely her eyes. They were very piercing, and the color of her eyes plus the intelligence that she had, I think it compounded, so it felt a lot of times like she was just looking straight into my soul. And that was something that I thought was really, really special. And yeah, I was excited and nervous and happy and probably over eager. But yeah, yeah, I was happy. So my favorite part of our connection was, it was probably more on the intellectual side. I think she had just had a really good grasp on what was going on in the world and how people acted and behaved. And I think she was just very insightful. And that was really good in my mind. Very obviously intelligent and very perceptive. And so there was a lot of similarity there. And I think that's probably what helped make things so easy in talking to her, was just that we could both pick up on kind of the unsaid signals that people have when talking to one another. And so, yeah, I think her intelligence and her grasp on life and the things that she wanted and was working towards out of life were really admirable. We were able to talk very naturally about a whole ton of different things, whether it was, some sort of fun idea or, something silly like a person in the coffee shop that we were at just complaining about their order, weird stuff, just fun stuff. Yeah, and I really enjoyed that and appreciated that and felt like it was a really genuine, natural connection. And yeah, I guess it didn't feel the same from her end. A little over a month in, we had been on a couple of really great dates. The first date we went to a coffee shop, not the one that I worked at. We had a great time, and I'm a big reader, I think I mentioned earlier. And when I showed up, she was reading the same book that I was reading at home. So she must have gotten there early and was taking some time to read. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm reading that book too." And she looked at me kind of like, "Are you actually, or are you just saying that because I'm reading it?" So it was, yeah, we had a great time, and enjoyed each other, laughed a lot. It was great to feel like I met somebody who spoke the same language. A lot of people, you meet them and it's all the same sort of, what do you do for a living? And, oh, what's your favorite part of your job? And just very basic surface level stuff. And I think for us it was very natural to talk about bigger things and bigger ideas and what was going on in the world, and how we thought about life and all these different experiences that generally don't come up on the first date. The first dates are usually pretty tame. But it was really great. So eventually, after a few dates, a lot of it was the similar sort of stuff, going to coffee shops and talking or just hanging out. And it just seemed like her schedule was so busy, which, was totally reasonable. She was in school and working and doing all this other sort of stuff. But it started to seem like every weekend it was like text her and say, "Hey, I'm free this day if you want to get together." And it was just, "Oh, I'm busy, I've got this thing going on, I've got that thing going on, I've got this thing with family, the whole weekend is completely booked." So the communication just slowed down, and after a while it was like I just wasn't getting text messages back. And so I eventually tried calling, and it was just went straight to voicemail, and I was never able to really get a response for why things fizzled out. I think confusion was the biggest part of it. A lot of times in life, when you're at work or you're at school or you're at any of these different things, it's like, okay, this is where you messed up, right? There's feedback on what you're doing incorrectly. And when it comes to love and relationships, there's not the same level of feedback. It's not as straightforward and, open and shut as other things in life are. And so for me, I was just confused. I wasn't sure if there was something that I did wrong, or if there was something that I failed to do, or if there was just, a natural disconnect between how I was feeling and what she was feeling. And I don't know, it kind of made me feel a little bit dumb in a certain sense too, because it was like, all right, I thought things were great, that this was awesome, and she just didn't feel the same way. And then I think after having those feelings, it was really like a thought spiral. You start thinking, what did I do? What did I not do? You know, what, when, why, where, how, all this stuff, and it starts to get overwhelming just thinking about it, especially when you care about somebody and it just ends abruptly and you have no idea why. I think we're geared to kind of figure out what we did wrong so that we don't do it again. And for me, that just it led to a lot of internal cyclical thoughts that were not super dark, but very negative about myself and the way that I felt. And yeah, I think I kind of withdrew for a while. I was confused and not necessarily lost, but there's a bit of anger too. It's like we spent this time together, and all of a sudden it's like I'm not worth taking 2 minutes to write a text message. Really? It doesn't take that long. It's not, you know, it's not like I'm asking you to write an essay on, hey, what's going on? Even something like, hey, I had fun hanging out. I feel like it's not going to go anywhere. So I prefer not to continue hanging out. That to me is more than adequate. That's perfectly fine. And it would take maybe 20 seconds to write that text message, and done. Boom. No problems. And I'm like, oh, it's not working out. She's just not feeling it. Perfect. That's fine. It wasn't a good experience. It's just sad, confusing, anxiety inducing, just on that thinking merry-go-round. What could I have done different? What went wrong? All that sort of stuff. And yeah, it made me feel bad. I think people ghost for a lot of different reasons, and some of them I think are more valid than others. Some of the less valid ones I think are that it's just more, I guess, convenient, I'd say. Like, it takes longer to explain to somebody why you're thinking or feeling a certain way than it does to just stop talking to them altogether. In this day and age, we're really only connected through our phones, right? It's not like she and I met at the local grocery store in a small town of, 15,000 people. It's like You know, you live in big cities and you meet these people in a random place. You know, she's just over on this side of town grabbing coffee and you get together. But the second that you don't want to see somebody again, it's pretty easy to just kind of avoid the places that you think they might be. You know, so it's very convenient and easy to just, I'm done messaging this person. I don't want to get into it. It would take me longer than I feel like I need to take to explain all this. I think another reason is really fear of conflict. I think that's a little more valid. I'm sure that there are lots of women who have had negative experiences with men, or, you know, men who are in pain or who are feeling hurt, who lash out at them. So I get that one a little bit more, where it's not just a fear of conflict, it's also a fear of negative reaction from the person that they're talking to. So I understand that one. I think it's not a valid reason to leave somebody in the dark. I don't think, you know, that it's a good excuse, but I get it. I get why people have that fear. I just also think that, you know, some of the best conversations and relationships that I've had in my life only happened after you had gotten through something that was uncomfortable. So, like having a tough conversation with somebody, usually going into a tough conversation is very difficult. And then after the fact, it's, you know, there's a weightless feeling because you've gotten something off of your chest, and the other person has, whether they've agreed or disagreed, or, you know, they've helped you to figure out what you're feeling, and how the two of you can be whole again. You know, after that, it's stronger and deeper of a relationship or a bond. And I think that that's super important. And a lot of people, they get stuck at that first little bit of discomfort of, I don't want to have it out with somebody, or I don't want to, you know, have an argument or go through what I'm feeling, even, you know, fear of what they have inside of themselves. So I think it's just an emotionally immature way to handle not wanting to continue a relationship with somebody. I mentioned that the way that we interact these days, a lot of it is through our phones. There's not a lot of bumping into somebody that you used to know. And I think because of that, there's definitely a culture of people being very accepting of ghosting. You know, it's not uncommon these days. It's not weird. I think everybody has a story like this. So I think for me, you know, I think that if people were just more honest and genuine, if they were willing to be brave enough to talk about the things that they're thinking and that they're feeling, and they were willing to open up with other people and be a little bit vulnerable, I don't think ghosting would really happen. It would be a weird phenomenon that happens every once in a while. And I think that, yeah, the world would be a much better place for that. Not just because people wouldn't get their feelings hurt when they get ghosted, but because people who do that sort of thing, they would just be more stable. They'd have better, deeper relationships. They wouldn't throw away their relationships as easily. They probably wouldn't think of things as quite as disposable as they do now. And I think the world would just be a better place. You know, ghosting it's in a certain sense, it's like emotional abuse, right? I can just say to somebody, hey, sorry, I'm not feeling this. I'm you know, happy to have met you, but I don't really want to continue on in our relationship. And instead of just taking a couple seconds to say that, or instead of overcoming their fear to be able to say something like that, they just leave you in the dark, tail spinning. Yeah, it's rude, it's mean, it's, you know, in some ways kind of abusive to the other person. And yeah, hopefully there will be a world one day where that doesn't happen to people. But, you know, we live in the world we live in.